e democracia. Of cultural and art production, management of cultural equipments. I work in that area as well. But nevertheless, I would have to change my speech in order to um, look into this concept of peripheral uh, condition. This work has lots of limitations. Nevertheless, I decided to guide my presentation towards this objective. I hope this will work. Now, I would like to start by saying something that is part of our work as researchers, which is to actually try to find any clarity, any clarification regarding concepts. And I'm not sure whether periphery is right now a concept in the sense that it should be a word that is minimally clear, and I believe that it falls under the category of vague concept because it's, sometimes empty of meaning, or because it has so much meaning that it ends up by having none. Now, this also entails another problem. It sometimes seems to be self-explanatory, and as a discourse device, we just continue and we say periphery and again periphery, and we may actually referring to things that are totally different, and those that listen to us may also be thinking of things that are different. If we were speaking about music, this would be a cacophony. So the only strategy that I found to actually get out of this situation is to use the definition of Bruno Latour, and he used to say that something is what you're speaking about when you're speaking about that thing. So if I want to know what is periphery, I want to question what someone wants to actually mean with periphery when that person is speaking about periphery. So it has to do with the ways of using this word, the word periphery, and about what, when he is speaking about what. And when we question this, we also question the person that is speaking. How can this legitimate that person's speech? What kind of arguments is the person using? How does this work? Different arguments, how do they work? And I would use the theories of Pierre Bourdieu, the situations in the social field, whether those that speak have a notorious position, hierarchical. I'm not speaking about hierarchy, whether this person is somebody that is considered an authority by society, or whether that person is a counterpower. All this seems to be essential to clarify our speech, because if we do not have another word that replaces periphery, when that word was had more clarity and had a bigger consensus, then it will be very difficult to actually get there. Now, 4 or 5 things about this map behind me. This is a cartography of 20 years of demographic evolution in the north of Portugal, and as usual, the blue represents areas that are decreasing, and warm colors, namely the yellow and red, what is growing, what is attractive, demographically speaking. So this map is very brings a lot of light into the way we actually deal with territory. There are many definitions of center and periphery that do not have to do with the maps, but most of them do. Center and periphery are in some cases are even places. They are part of the geography. So it is very good that this perhaps this map to actually clarify what happens in the northern part of the country. If we look into urbanization, what we see is an urbanization with an extension, with a scale, with a morphology, that are all extremely complex. No point reducing urbanization to a city. I mean, this is what you see most of the times in science and certainly in the media. Even also, municipalities. I recall a sentence from Françoise Chouet, and she said this 40 years ago, that the city had lost the monopoly of urbanization. So, whatever was urbanization used to be a city bounded by a wall, a fortification wall, but now this is, the rest is somewhere out there. And that's what we have on the map, with a very big extension. I mean, we are not in Mexico City or São Paulo. This is very big in terms of Portugal. 3 point something million people. And then we have that dichotomy, beyond the area of Marão, Trás-os-Montes. Everything is blue. Now, the blue is an archaeology of the mode of planning that was enforced for centuries. This used to be called the rural world. We're speaking about thousands of ideas, and it's almost a poetical and artistic kind of thing. We go to those places, we see very old houses, in ruins, and we also see ruins of the first houses that were built by immigrants. And when we speak to those that are there, I'm not calling them residents, we understand that it is very much a society that includes people that live in other places and only go there on weekends, people that live in Chaves, for instance, and a whole amount is so much instability, and this has to do with certain needs. Somebody that is ill, and What seems to be clear to us is that in the villages and in urban centers such as Mirandela, Bragança, there is a kind of focus of resistance that has a public anchor that was created during the first community support frameworks, and it was then that we created something that we did not have in Portugal, which was the social welfare. We then had schools, health centers, swimming pools, hospitals, a sort of a kit of functions of the central state that would modernize everything. Infrastructures were modernized and would also attract investment, but that did not happen when those investments actually appeared. Things did not work out in favor of those areas. So we call the situation a peripheral situation, but we do not know exactly what we're speaking about, because we have the most diverse things when it comes to social dynamics. So periphery includes this idea of being far from, being deprived of things. Periphery is the place or the condition. I prefer the second one as a geographer. A peripheral place is not a fado or a fate. It is something that can change any time. And we have peripherizations because life is complicated and because the mechanisms that reproduce this exclusion phenomena are very powerful, but we have other peripherizations that exist by option. Sociologists speak about tribalization, people that get together and that want to organize life in a certain manner at a certain place. Well, that has to do usually with a way of being in life and a certain critical thinking vis-a-vis society, vis-a-vis with regards to consumerism, for instance. Second, if I was able to actually build a geometry for periphery, I could in fact have two geometries. One, which would be an Euclidean geography. I would measure distances by meters and kilometers and so on. I would have centers and peripheries that would, be precisely located with distances, and physical distance would be proportional to social distancing. So the farthest away, more distant from certain experiences. However, I feel that this does not work today. This has been questioned by instability, by fluidity, by liquid modernity, as Bowen called it, and by a world that is better understood by networks of relationship and the turbulence that is associated to movement, and not by the fixedness of forms. And the other geometry is a topologic one, such as the maps on the subway. We see dots and lines that unite these dots. In the subway, you see that the distance between 2 points gives us exactly a system of relationship, and this is what the topologic map transmits to us, and I believe this is what happens in peripherization processes. Third, the dichotomy that has always worked. A periphery is also a periphery of a center. And how can this be? I mean, if we are using this idea of periphery applied to so many different things that have to do with our life, the access to a profession, access to information, going to a hospital, so many issues that can actually feature a peripheral condition. And considering that we can combine this in so many ways, I cannot point out one single center that could actually include everything that is the contrary of the peripheral condition. And now I'll give you an example. I mean, with regards in the art field, I mean, what is periphery? Somebody that is in a center and that uses periphery to gain some new ideas. And I see this many times, because people tend to go somewhere away from where they actually live. They work there for a certain amount of time, and then they return and show the work that they've done. It will be exactly the other way around for those that live in a periphery, and during their life, during their day-to-day life, they actually come across a series of circumstances that is actually different from those that come and go. I say this because here in Portugal, and not only, I see peripheries being concerned kind of magical places, contrary to the usual topics that are part of the global agenda and the global imagination, such as the war in Ukraine, climate change, but then these worlds end up by not connecting. This can be seen in the cinema, for instance. Last, how can we understand these the situation, these positions, I mean, this relationship, to know whether we have a higher mobility or a higher fixation. We see that in some areas, some peripheries are more unstable than others, and those that are not that stable tend not to change their condition, their status. In those that have a certain potential and some possibilities of mobility and fluidity, we see things that are very interesting and that are really out of common. And let me change the maps to actually change, and this was part of my first idea of presentation. Periphery considered vis-a-vis urbanization, and there was this English architect that used this very interesting metaphor that had to do with eggs, and he said that basically what has happened during the last times can be explained with three egg recipes. The first one is boiled egg. Everything is inside the shell of the egg, and at the same time the city designates a space, a place, it has a name, it has a certain identity, but it also designates a form of government. It could be a state city of Italy, of Florence, for instance. So this is an idea that still subsists, that a city is something, that it is a circle. I mean, if it is a big place, the circle will be bigger. We have a name, you know. But then we have a fried egg, and this is what we have in Lisbon, and then confusion starts. Because instead of doing what should be done, there was a very profound metamorphosis of what happened here, and we need to change the name of this thing. This is what Michel Foucault defends. Well, we've conserved the word down to actually feature or characterize certain contexts, and we call suburbs, lands without name to the white of the egg, and we then have a relationship between the center and the periphery. The center becomes increasingly more central. It produces some polarization, everything that it is called money, and Portugal is a very centralized country. If we look into big government departments and agencies, and then big organizations, everything that has to do with foreign investment, we see that there is an impressing mass that results in a strong polarization effect. The last investment was Park Expo, which is again more hardware within the Lisbon municipality, and the model becomes increasingly more dysfunctional, because even geometrically, when the circle increases, the white, the area to be serviced increases, and then the concentration of the power contributes, further contributes to that inequality. If this was a physical thing, it would be a black hole. It has a tremendous power of attractiveness. Any particle that appears in the vicinity is immediately attracted, and this has a result in prices of houses, and the centrifuge effects tends to get rid of everything that does not fit in this. So I would say that without thinking that in the egg yolk, there are many things that have the tendency to actually be concentrated on the yolk, because we understand that we have a higher possibility of actually getting people and things into that area. Sometimes those peripherization processes at its center are less known, and in the white we have things that are different, either exclusion or the contrary. The French invented this concept of golden periphery to distinguish from the red periphery, which were the workers, and the golden periphery were those that would be away from the center because they had money. It's just like the story of the good girls and bad girls. Good girls go to heaven, but bad girls go everywhere. And this is the last recipe, which is the one that we tend to see more often, is scrambled eggs. I mean, we could add bacon to them, anything else. So here we are at the limit of this idea of urbanization. I mean, the limit, exactly opposite to what to the idea we had of this in the past. And this central condition and peripherization processes can actually materialize in very specific context, and the representation of places is then a bit puzzling. In this case, Photoshop is very good not to mislead you, but rather to produce concepts regarding uncertain spaces. And if we change the scale, our mental map, where we actually put the dichotomy center periphery, and here in Portugal we speak about the interior, the interior of or the inner most lands of Portugal and of the Iberian Peninsula, and we have this engine in the Iberian Peninsula, which is Madrid. If we change this geography and go up to the global geography, we could say many things. This is a map that was produced by João Ferrão. This is the archipelago, the country archipelago. I can't be too much detailed about this, but there is a very big area wide, which is the country that he says is underwater. All the indicators are very much below the average, and then we have the fried egg in Lisbon. Then we have up north the situation I've described, and then we have those dots. Those dots are signs, the anchors. These are capitals of different districts that continue to maintain certain dynamics in this emptying process. Generically speaking, we see that there is an emptying, but in certain places, in the heads of different municipalities, things we see those pouches of resistance, and that's where we need to focus our attention. I could show you many maps. This is the last one, the evolution of the last decade. This is not well studied, because when we look into this map and we see this dichotomy between the north and the south, prevent us from understanding what is really happening in detail. I would like to show you two examples on how to understand the peripheral condition and how to actually overcome that. One is in Mindelo, in Cape Verde. This project was received an award yesterday by the it is called AGEC. It is called Outros Bairros, other neighborhoods. Please do explore this information, and it shows how in conditions that are very adverse, poverty in a society such as Cape Verdean society, we never know where people are, and it's like in physics, and we can't really see where the particles are. But in Cape Verde it's the same thing. Majority of Cape Verdeans do not live there. They are in Rotterdam, in the US, somewhere else, and so that the way we access certain communities is very complicated. And funny enough, in this case, things went very well, and the first obstacles started to happen on the side of the government and local administration, because the immediate reading that was made by the politicians was that what was being done here in favor of the populations was questioning the authority of the government. So there was a clash, and I say that Maisa, and she's one of these uh, builders here, and she said, well, for these things we are people, but after this we are people that are jobless and that do nothing. So the important would be for these people to actually overcome the problems that they have to actually gain more citizenship. So the Aga Khan Foundation actually looked into this complicated dynamics and does some kind of reset. Now we can actually reproduce this project. And the last one, or rather the second, corrects the speaker, is MDOC. This is a documentary film festival in Melgaço. This is a film from Galicia, and before actually being taken to our festival, had been taken to the festival of Paris 2 or 3 times. So this is the story of somebody, a French person, that actually came to Melgaço and decided to live there after retirement or during retirement, and he left to Melgaço many items that had to do with the history of cinema, and he created. He recovered an old theater and decided to recover that and created this film festival. Well, we're trying to actually use this festival and in August and June we have a very intensive program. We have lots of workshops. We have films that are produced throughout the year, then are edited and are shown here. We had 350 films shown. And to conclude, I'm part of a project called Quem Somos, Os que Aqui Estamos, Who Are We, Those That Are Here. And we work with the existing information. For instance, one of the last projects, we work with marriage photos, and the question is very simple, who is this person and this person and this person, and where are they? So we needed a map of the whole planet. The only place where you cannot find people from Melgaço is in Antarctica, to understand something that is the fact that we are people of migrants and migrations. I mean, it's not a go and come kind of thing. I mean, and return kind of thing. In some cases, we have third generations of Portuguese that have stayed in the countries to where they have migrated. Well, I spoke to these 3 women, and one spoke to me about deaths. Then there was another woman that decided to go to France. Things did not go very well. She married a German and then decided to go to Canada. But then they decided to return to Portugal. And now she has a PhD in and she is working at Oporto. And at a certain point, I stopped to actually really try to see where we were. Ricoré, that was instant coffee that was drunk in Spain in the 60s, and this one lady was speaking about death, and the other one was speaking about molecular biology. So I think that we should not take for granted that community is something that exists. Community is something that entails a process of formulation, and all that we have here, voicing participation in projects, but being paid to participate. In Cape Verde, this was very important because the project had to include at least 70% of local manpower. Empathy, leadership, respect, these are very important. Legitimating, using, and so on. And then down below, what I was mentioning just a while ago concerning policies and macro policies, or rather politics and macro policies. We have to understand the minister and the Aga Khan Foundation and how these two decided to interconnect in this case of Cape Verde. Sorry for taking too much of your time.
Thank you very much, Alvaro. We have taken up a bit more of the time that had been allocated to you, but I think we still have time for a short discussion. Hands in the air for questions, comments. Well, while we wait for the audience, I myself have a question. You asked, where are we? Where are we, those of us who are part of a project called Stronger Peripheries, and who find ourselves in the peripheries all the while. And I apologize if I'm offending anyone, because I'm trying to simplify and perhaps things aren't that simple. But perhaps we are the ones who go to the peripheries to gather something and to see what we find there and bring back something to our own little small lives. I know it's not this simple, but where are we? Where are we amongst those of us who are cultural agents, cultural producers, academics? Well, it depends. At the project in Melgaço, everything happens to me. I use my experience in the paper I need to write, but the opposite as well. I am there, and when talking to people, because it's very intense relationship when we are talking and drinking coffee, we say everything. We talk about everything. We talk about everything because people ask us questions. I met the research director of our friend biologist, and we talked about that. So we take to the place and we bring back things. At a similar meeting like this one in Admira, I was talking into an anthropologist, and he told me, bring someone with you. And I did. And he loved to be there. So we should not reduce things to the moment. We should try and expand experiences. This project would be different if it was a one-off situation. But since every year we hold these events, we have people who join us. We see that in the following year, we have people who come because they came in the previous year. There are people who in Parish X who were curious and came to see what all of this was about. And sometimes they bring with them bread that they baked and their chorizo. And we all have a snack at the end of the discussion. So we invite friends and not just speakers. When, for example, we prepare the photos, we ask people to reproduce the photos and to expose them publicly. And it's not always easy because normally people don't want to be exposed. Sometimes the relative comes and says, no, you have to remove the picture. I don't want to be up there. And I say, well, your sister gave us permission. And he says, yes, but I don't. So, in spite of isolation trends, people try to isolate themselves, but these are very special moments where people take risks, take different risks, and they never forget them, and they try to incorporate them in their routines, and photography is an excellent example of that. Or they discuss whole different topics around photographs. So to take this all of this material to our own social field which we belong to without being only extractive, without leaving anything behind. No, that we shouldn't do. We can use all of this in different ways, and the more diverse the context. For example, I brought my example to this context. This is exactly what happens. It's different, and this is what we have to do. Otherwise, it's like TV shows. That awful TV shows where they have a stage in a village, and they have those disgusting programs, TV shows, and they leave nothing behind. They call it the profound Portugal. This is what they call it.
Obrigado.
Thank you very much. You use the metaphor, the scrambled eggs, where some micro events can happen, like in Malgaço. I have a question. How did the festival come up, and how was it appropriated by the locals? So a place that comes out of the scrambled egg, and then it gains those microscopic vegetables. Well, we need to think of the two things. So there must be a nucleus that supports the two ends, sensitive ends of the things. On the one end, the local, and the other end is bringing people to the local. In a festival, it's easier because we have a jury. But because in cinema or photography or documentary festivals, we normally have different juries from one year to the other, and we invite people who we know are famous, the so-called famous, in their fields, and they will be the ambassadors of the experience. They will talk about that experience to others. So this end is very important. Otherwise, the whole event will be closed and will not expand. The other end is harder to obtain. Let me give you an example. It's very difficult to work with schools, because schools have their routines and lack decision making and surreal programs like geography. The syllabus of geography is not at all interesting, and teachers only focus on the tests, on the exams, and nothing happens. And I work much more easily with schools in Galicia because only half of the syllabus is focused on the national exams. The other half is up to the schools to decide what they want to do. But here, cinema and photography are excellent for capturing the interest of students. But it's so difficult to bring that into schools. And it's not due to lack of inertia, it's just that teachers are overwhelmed with everything they need to teach. And since these are documentary films, they need to be reproduced in the municipalities. And every year we have 3 films with characters, and the characters are invited to watch the films and to bring their friends. And in summer we have cinema in the open air. And thus we hold a festival. In the beginning, we only had 1 or 2 of the locals, but no longer. We need to insist, repeat, and sometimes at the end of the film, we have snacks and socializing. So after 2 or 3 versions, things flow much easily. We will need to end here, apology, but I have a question. Good morning, Professor. I have a very short question. You participated in a film where you show your journey through the center of Portugal. And I would like to ask you, what did this process bring to you in terms of what you observed? Well, I have not yet been able to process everything, I must say. I think that most of you know Tiago Pereira, and Tiago has an inexhaustible energy. We would leave at 10 a.m. and at 10 p.m. we would discussing what we would do the following day. So we wouldn't even breathe from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. And the filmmaker Antonio Aleixo, I would ask him, you film hours, how will you put that into a film? And he says, leave that to me. I only needed to focus on a big diversity of people, a couple of a Swedish couple, for example, who lived in a bubble. Everything was so good, the climate, the food, but they knew no one. Well, they knew other Swedish couple who were their neighbors only. And then surprising things, a man who worked in a lumber shop and now he restores Baroque art. How you came to that, I don't have enough time, but he does exist. And then the biologist who was coordinating the peopling of deer in the mountains, and a paraplegic man who had to overcome that crash and that fatality and was now a trainer. And then the fireman, etc. So what did I see? I saw a very fine mesh of a fine mesh that touches society in different points. or people, institutions, and organizations, and a component of people who are not from that place, who are there but are not from there. And then new dynamics like Rabasal cheese and different ways of marketing that cheese and different businesses resulting from this. So I have no simple answer for your question. It reminded me a book by Luis Borges, Aleph, who Aleph was a point on the map and where we would find an entire world. So we have a very small town that is shadowed by Coimbra because it's all too close, Coimbra. So I found all of this that I've just described to you. So I didn't even stop. Even during lunch break, lunch was served in somebody's home who had a story to tell. So we were always on top of the story. We really need to move on to the next session. I am receiving messages from all over. So thank you very much, Alvaro. Thank you. And I now give the floor to Marta.